to the Uncommon Living podcast, where we host dialogues in human resilience. I'm Thomas Seager. I'm an associate professor in the School of Sustainable Engineering at Arizona State University and the CEO of the Morozko Forge Ice Bath Company. My guest today is Andrew Sheridan. He's the founder of the Drip Therm Thermal Contrast Studio outside Cleveland, Ohio. Andrew healed nerve damage in his left foot that resulted from an Achilles tendon repair surgery by using a method of thermal contrast therapy that pendulates between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems when he's doing his cold plunge. In this episode, Andrew explains to me his method, and I speculate about how that might relate to the repair of his neuropathy. Andrew Sheridan, thank you for joining me on the Uncommon Living podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Tom. Absolute pleasure.
You have turned yourself into one of the world's foremost experts on coaching people through cold plunge therapy. You were telling me a little while ago before we started recording that you studied lots of methods. You've studied under Vim, and you've adopted what you think are the best methods that work for your customers at Drip Therm and use them successfully in your own health. I want to hear more about this journey. Will you enlighten me?
Sure, I certainly will. So we're sitting in Drip right now. We're sitting in the lounge of our sauna house. This honestly started by accident. And by accident, I mean an actual accident. So I was a fairly highly paid management consultant in a senior position, been in management consulting for 24 years. Very stressful job, a lot of flying. Health was going south. So my doctor basically said, you need to improve a lot of numbers, right? We've got to right this ship, or you're going on meds. So my solution to that was just not to go back to my doctor.
Mm-hmm. How old were you at that time?
This is two years ago.
Wow. Okay.
2 years ago. So I was 47.
Mm-hmm.
And I started working out more, improving my diet, etc. And I tore my Achilles. So now I couldn't travel. Now I couldn't meet clients. The operation went well, but the nerve blocker portion clearly didn't because I suffered nerve damage. The nerve blocker was meant to wear off after about 2 to 3 days. 5 months later, I still had maybe 30% feeling in my foot and ankle. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't work it. So I couldn't rehab properly. I was coming out of physical therapy, kind of failing rehab every week. So now health is only getting worse, right? There's no movement. Probably not eating and drinking the right things. And it led me on a desperate search, frankly. Well, how do I fix this? Because PT isn't working. The feeling isn't coming back. What do I do? Sheer desperation, open checkbook. That's how this all started.
Okay, let me summarize. You knew probably from blood markers that your health was in poor shape, and you decided to do something about it instead of take your doctor's medication. But in that process, you tore your Achilles tendon and suffered nerve damage during the operation to repair the tendon?
Exactly.
Okay, so this nerve damage, it could be peripheral, or it could be something more central. Nerves don't always grow back, Andrew. Did you have a physician to consult with at the time that you knew you weren't getting the proper feeling back in your foot?
No, I would speak to physical therapy about it every week. And, they gave me some, oh, let's try to get the sensation back. Let's, you know, scratch it with a rough tennis ball, for example. These
Yep.
kind of tips, tricks.
Stimulate it.
And
Yep.
yeah, exactly. And just nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. So I have now a mobility issue. I have a career issue because I can't travel and meet clients and make sales and do deals. So yeah, that started the sheer desperation that led to heat and cold.
Okay. But give us the spoiler alert. How's your foot now?
It's about 95% restored feeling. I can not only walk perfectly well, but I can run again. I don't think it will ever be 100%. And I only say that because the improvement to 95% was so dramatic, and then it kind of shelled off. It's not stopping me doing anything. Just a little reminder of what happened.
Then you are facing this. It is a life crisis. Not necessarily that your life was in danger, but certainly your life as you knew it, your profession, your identity, and your capacity to take care of yourself in accordance with your doctor's warning or in response to your doctor's warning. All of these are collapsing upon you, and you decided you were going to run some experiments in hot and cold?
I decided to run some experiments in everything. I had no idea that hot and cold were even on the cards at that point. So to give you an idea very quickly, again, open checkbook, I bought pneumatic boots. I went to salt caves, tried cryotherapy, tried cold plunge. I sold my Corvette to make room in my garage to buy an infrared sauna and a Finnish sauna, and actually eventually compare those back to back. I got my surgeon's permission early on to actually buy a Formula One simulation rig because I could adjust the PSI in the brake pedal because it was my left foot, and slowly start to rehab that way. Any single thing you can think of in the wellness space, short of vitamin C showers, I tried.
I've never even heard of vitamin C showers. Um, but I love the research. I love the scientific experimental approach. What did you find out that works?
I found out that cryotherapy was fun, but didn't really move the needle at all. I found that I liked infrared sauna in terms of I could sit and read a book or whatever, but it wasn't moving the needle. Salt caves, etc., did nothing. Pneumatic boots temporarily had a great reduction in swelling, but then 30 minutes later, you're back in exactly the same place. And then what I ultimately realized was that hotter traditional Finnish sauna and cold plunge were having dramatic results. And I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was just me. I, I hadn't looked into the science at that point. And my very simplistic way, Tom, of thinking about it was I was thinking about it like a two-way pump: vasodilation and vasoconstriction. That's how I was thinking of heat and cold, and nothing else. I hadn't looked at the science at that point.
Was there a moment at which you said, holy crap, I think I've discovered something that's working for me?
Yes, there was, and then it was complete confusion because obviously there's no study in this particular issue that I found myself with. But there were a few revelations there, Tom. There was one, oh, this is amazing that the sensation in my foot is actually coming back. I'm able to do more. Now I'm able to travel again. I'm able to visit clients. I'm able to work out. There was less pain in other areas because I was compensating because of my walking mechanics. All that was starting to improve. But it wasn't just fixing that core issue. It was like, why am I more relaxed? Why does life piss me off less, or at least my reaction to it is better? Why am I driving better? Why am I not in so much of a hurry anymore? Why am I not getting as annoyed when somebody really slow is driving 10 miles per hour below the speed limit in front of me? It was there was a lot happening all at the same time, and it was all really exciting, frankly.
What were you doing, and how long did it take to convince you that you were making lasting gains?
With cold plunge and Finnish sauna specifically, I think it was only a handful of weeks that I knew there was improvement, and and honestly, it was a handful of months where I had made dramatic improvements. So at that point, I got into a really consistent routine. So I'd stopped the searching. I had stopped, you know, looking for the next magical wellness trend that's going to improve things. I I knew this was working, and I knew it was having all these other benefits as well, right? Sleeping better, stress management, you name it. Everything seemed to be improving at the same time. Mood was a massive part of that, Tom. Probably for two reasons. One, I'm getting that mobility back and things are just getting better. But two, no, just I'm very type A, and I'm just a better type A when I do Finnish sauna
Mhm.
and cold plunge.
Then what you discovered was super hot. I'm guessing over 180 degrees Fahrenheit in the Finnish sauna. Am I wrong about that?
You are absolutely correct. So I was doing that anyway. I was probably at about 185.
Hmm.
My little sauna was kind of a budget sauna, so it didn't have necessarily the best air exchange in the world, didn't have the best thermal mass in the world. So that was as much as felt comfortable to me. But then when I kind of stumbled on well, I didn't really stumble on it. I was actually searching. I found the Laukkanen cohort studies and realized, oh, well, 176 is kind of the floor for many of the dramatic health benefits that come from Finnish sauna. So I kind of accidentally got to the right temperature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know how much of an accident it was, but agreeing with you that getting up over 180 is the right temperature. I've done the infrared saunas and they're relaxing, but 145 is boring. I'll barely break a sweat. If I want 145, I can just climb into my car in Phoenix, Arizona. Without the AC, I'll be at 145 before you know it. But what did you do on
Yeah,
the
it's
cold side?
on the cold side. I was all over the place. I started off with your typical Amazon tub. That's where this whole thing started. Your $99 glorified paddling pool. In Cleveland in the winter, in an insulated but not heated garage, I could I could get that thing down to about 45. That's where the benefits started. But what I quickly realized is that was just impossible to manage from a water quality perspective. I just couldn't do it. I did all the usual things people do, added spa
Ozone
chemicals, added
bubblers.
fish tank
Yep.
filter, you name it. I could not stay on top of it. And then in the winter, of course, you can't exactly dump out 60 gallons of water down your driveway without turning it into a cold version of a slip and slide. So yeah, I was quickly searching for actual manufacturer products.
Hmm. What did you settle on?
settled on Morozko Forge, and there were a few reasons to that, but one of them was, this whole thing was new to me. So I'm looking at the science, and I'm also just trying to learn more about the whole practice in general. So I actually flew to Phoenix and attended Morozko method certification in the desert in Sedona. Wonderful location, like literally cold plunge in the desert. And truthfully, I got really intrigued about the tubs, not just the fact that they used ozone. So I was, you're basically ending up with a zero chemical solution. If,
Correct.
you spill that water on the floor, it quickly just turns into water.
Yep.
Aspects like that, just honestly, the look of them. And there was something intriguing about first seeing one in the desert, frankly. Seeing the ice forming in it, and then realizing, oh, well, I guess the rest of these don't do that. Why don't they do that? That's kind of, so that kind of became my reference point, Tom, at which I was looking at every other manufactured product.
One of the things you don't see, but you can feel, is that the Morozko is grounded. There's no plastic, fiberglass, or acrylic tub that is grounded. And because you can't see grounding on Instagram or whatever it is, it's something that people
Yeah.
overlook too often. The benefits of grounding are extraordinary because we live so electrically disconnected from the earth that we're in a constant state of electrical imbalance. It adversely impacts our nervous system and especially our circulatory system by allowing the viscosity of our blood to increase to the point where we're no longer getting good circulation in our capillaries. And those little micro blood vessels are what the nervous system depends upon. So you might have thought that, well, Morozko is right for me because it's colder and it has ice. And that could very well be true. We're going to talk about that. But something that's going on that is more difficult to sense is the fact that you're getting grounded every time you're in there.
Yeah. And it's that. So that's exactly what I tell our customers at Drip is, don't think that you're just getting a cold plunge. The way I think about it is you're grounding and you're getting an ozone bath while you're cold plunging.
Correct. I think about it the same way. The ozone benefits, most people are in there for such a short time that we don't have any good clinical data on whether they're getting transdermal ozone absorption or whether their skin is getting any benefit from the ozone. What we do know is we're not poisoning our customers with chlorine. All the other manufacturers that rely upon stabilizers and oxidizers and these chemicals that you have to add are doing something unnatural to the water that has a detrimental effect to the body. The reason that we use ozone and Morozko is because I don't believe in poisoning my customers.
Yeah. And then there's also, there's a residual factor as well there. So that water's coming, some of that water is coming out of the tub. When somebody gets out of the tub, it's going onto the floor, and whether
Right.
it's mopped or evaporated, that there's still that chlorine's going somewhere.
Yeah.
It hasn't disappeared. It's not a third oxygen atom.
Mm-hmm. After you figured out that hot and cold was working for you, I think most people would appreciate that it would reduce swelling. Cold's very good for that. I think most people would appreciate that the sauna improves circulation and that you're getting this smooth muscle workout, the vasodilation, where the smooth muscles relax and the blood vessels open up to allow better circulation, and then the vasoconstriction, where the smooth muscle tissues that control these blood vessels contract and move all the blood into your core. Most people, at least the ones listening to this podcast, would appreciate the circulatory benefits of this thermal contrast therapy. But what's really mysterious is the way that it restored your nerve, that is your feeling, your sensations, proprioception, the control that you had over your left foot. That's something that I need to know more about. Have you looked into those mechanisms?
I I did. I tried. I looked into the science in general, and I was trying to work out. Well, there's got to be some sort of trail of breadcrumbs, right? That kind of explains this, even if it hasn't been directly studied. I didn't actually find it, Tom. So I in my head, whether right or wrong, the way I thought about it was the two-way pump. And that was so that was especially important. If you think about it, it's also at a time where I don't have great mobility. So I don't have other ways to really tax my cardiovascular system. So
That's a great point.
it was
As far as getting your heart rate up, you know, you'd have to have very specialized exercises that you could do, given the fact that your foot is disabled, if you're going to get your cardio in. But sauna and cold is an exercise mimetic. That is, it'll give you about 80% of the benefits that the exercise would do without you even exercising.
exactly, and that's kind of what I was using it for as well, because you can actually feel your heart pumping.
Yep.
I mean, it's doing a lot of work to heat you up. It's doing a lot of work to cool you down. And that stress, I couldn't get that stress anywhere else at that time.
There is a woman in Columbus at the Ohio State University. She's a neuroscientist who specializes in fat. Her name is Christy Townsend. She's not that far from you. I interviewed her last week on the relationship between fat cells and the nervous system. Brown fat is highly innervated. That means that when your body recruits brown fat, it's not just adding mitochondria, but it's adding nerves. What she taught me is that the peripheral nerves are capable of regrowing. We usually think of the central nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord. And when we were kids, we were taught, well, you're never going to make another new brain cell in your life. The spinal cord can't heal. That turns out to be false. It's more difficult and it's slower. But yes, your brain is under constant regeneration. Neuroplasticity lasts your entire life. And there are many tragic cases of injured spinal cords that never heal. But there is more plasticity in the central nervous system than we thought. And she taught me that in the peripheral nervous system, this thing is growing and sort of shrinking all the time in response to the stimulus that you're giving it. So now I'm formulating a hypothesis that your foot is, of course, an extremity, that when you're stimulating it with the heat and the cold, yes, the circulation is good. Yes, the improved circulation will promote cell growth. But there might be something going on in your nervous system that is different than rubbing it with a rough tennis ball, that allows the peripheral nervous system to restore itself, at least to this, you're estimating 95% level, where you can get back to walking and exercising. And it makes me want to go back to Christy Townsend and ask her if the cold can stimulate growth of new peripheral nerves in brown fat. Could it also do it in a tendon? Could it also do it in a foot? I don't know. And I doubt that anybody has really done the trial here. I think you're out on the leading edge of what would constitute a hypothesis for science.
By accident.
Or necessity, which is the mother of invention.
Yeah, exactly.
That created more changes for you. After you discovered what worked for you, I think, if I'm surmising correctly, you realized that this could probably help a lot of other people, but those people either didn't have the desperate sense of motivation that you had, or they had an unwillingness, or they had obstacles to overcome before they could do this extreme thermal contrast therapy. And you must have started thinking about how to coach other people through an experience that was analogous to what you were doing.
Yeah, it actually started, Tom. It started with how do I get people access to this? Because the frustration that I had when I first did a cold plunge, and first of all, I couldn't find a finished sauna. That's why I ended up making space in my garage and buying one. But with the cold plunge, I think I drove just under an hour, and it was one of those kind of, I call them like a wellness pick and mix place where it's, hey, we bought one of everything, flotation tank, whatever, go try stuff. I was only there for the cold plunge. That was all I was interested in. But it was at the warmest temperature it should really be, 59 degrees. I was in there for
That's a
12
tepid
minutes, I
plunge.
think. I was in there for 12 minutes, Tom. I think this is what people kind of forget that are practice cold plungers is I was shivering so hard after 12 minutes that the tub was rocking because it was slightly imbalanced. I was euphoric. I felt amazing afterwards. At that time, I didn't understand, norepinephrine, dopamine, none of that. I knew I felt amazing. And I said to one of the owners, lovely older couple, I said, hey, this is amazing. If I keep doing this, and and I need to drop the temperature down. Could we do that? And the response was, no, dear, this is the temperature we like. And I was so mad, and I thought, oh, wait, so this is about you as an operator.
Uh-huh.
This is not about me as a customer. And I later realized that, well, that's not quite true because it's all down to me, it's down to physics and the specific heat capacity of water. If I want 50 degrees and somebody else wants 40, they better come back 24 hours later. So
It
for an
takes a lot to
operator,
move heat out of water. Yep.
yeah, that's why we use it in the radiators of cars. So
Yep.
from that perspective, then I realized, okay, so it's not necessarily selfishness. It's the only way to solve this problem that I could see, because specific heat capacity is a real challenge, is money and multiplication. That's to me what that came down to. So then I started to think about, oh well, if I can do that, I can get people physical access to what they need. So I consider it similar to, would you join a gym, Tom, that only had 5 pound dumbbells
Hmm.
or 80 pound dumbbells? It's the right stress for somebody at some point in their adaptation journey, but not for most people. So then I started to think about, well, how do I get people not just access, then the right access? And at the same time, I had the Morozko method certification, and then I went kind of as a spectator almost over to Stro in the Netherlands to attend a Wim Hof weekend. And it was really just to kind of observe, kind of how are they doing it over here? How's it different? How much of this is ritual that is kind of attached to this whole, what to me was a very scientific process? How much is lore? How much is ritual? How much of this stuff could be stripped away?
Hmm.
Because when I looked at finished sauna and cold plunge, I loved them. But when I started talking to people, they're like, well, wait, you went to Sedona and you did a cold plunge in the desert? Are you a hippie? I didn't
You
think
are
you were a
now, I
hippie.
guess.
Do you have balloon pants? Do you have a tie-dye t-shirt? There's all this just cultural attachment to it.
Where are your
And
butterfly crystals? Yeah.
exactly. And then I realized, well, that most of this stuff can be taken away.
Hmm.
And if you take it away, then you're basically, in my view, democratizing it.
Hmm.
There's the physical barrier to entry of, can people actually get access to a cold plunge near them, and that's at a temperature that is right for their place in the adaptation journey. But also, it's culturally, does it feel accessible? Does it feel like something that's for them? And I felt exactly the same way with Finnish sauna. The additional issues that we had, especially when I talked to my wife's friends about this, her girlfriends, was, wait a minute, Finnish sauna? Am I going to be with other people? Is this going to be the Greyhound bus of sauna?
Do
Am
we have to
I,
be naked?
wait,
Yeah.
do we have to be naked? Is someone going to beat me with branches? I've seen that. Does
Right.
that, like, ooh, anxiety just raises, and it's like, okay, well, I personally love the culture, but if my goal selfishly is to get people access and make them feel like it's for them, then I've got to take a slightly different approach.
So there's a lot on YouTube about what's the best time and the best temperature for a cold plunge. If you Google and you say, I want to start a weight training program, how should I start? Google does not tell you the best weight, the best number of reps to start your bench press or whatever. It says, look, you got to start off with a weight that is right for your level of fitness. Maybe something that you could lift 10 or 11 times where the last rep is really difficult for you. All right. But if you Google where I want to start a cold plunge practice, Google will say there's one temperature, there's one time, and it's right for everybody. Because that's the mythology that Google is drawing from off the internet right now. Your analogy,
Yeah.
both based upon your experience and based upon our understanding of human physiology, is quite apt. If you were to go into 59 degrees for 12 minutes, my guess is you wouldn't shiver at all now because you are cold
Yep.
adapted. Your body has what's called thermoadaptative responses. That is thermogenesis, which is the creation of heat, and it can be through muscle shivering or it can be activation of your brown fat. But also the vasoconstriction is meant to defend your core body temperature against the cold. As you become cold adapted, you need either colder temperatures or longer times or both to continue to get the same dose or the same degree of challenge. So that's one. Um, the barrier there is, how does somebody find a facility with the right level of dose for them as they adapt? Either the facility is sitting there at 39 degrees and everybody's got to start with the same weight and just sort of adjust their reps. Or what you've done is have different machines set at different temperatures so that people can progress as they adapt. Okay, that was the first one. The second one is, you're saying there's kind of a cultural, like an identity statement. Am I the kind of person who even cold plunges? Like, do people like me even do something like that? If you have to, I don't know, have a huge beard and run around in the snow like Rasputin or something, then no one is going to identify with that character who would actually do a cold plunge. Vim, in this regard, is sensational. He's swimming under the ice at the Arctic Ocean or something, and he's breaking world records. And we love watching it. But that doesn't mean that we identify with Wim. That doesn't mean that we think of ourselves as crazy Dutchmen. That doesn't mean that you're going to get a woman who is suffering from PCOS or has some Raynaud's and is thinking, I need to challenge myself metabolically to overcome these issues. But I'm not going to do that because I'm not that type of person. So you must, in this sense, create a different culture or a different experience that strips away some of the superstitions. You called it the rituals that have been associated with thermal contrast therapy, and replaces them with things that make the experience more welcoming for the mainstream, if I've understood you correctly.
That's exactly right. And it's the same as the coaching process. It's strip away everything that could possibly keep somebody from benefiting from both of these experiences. And that's definitely working. We're getting people in that aren't of, say, the typical crowds that would use heat and cold in these formats. So definitely getting success there. Yeah, it's a big thing for me, because when I first went to an experience around this, I felt like the odd one out. I was actually actively identified as the odd one out.
You were the narc,
I
Andrew.
I was the nar- I was the troublemaker, I think is what I was playfully called.
Yeah.
Um, because I'd say, wait a minute, was that statement? Wait, was that statement rooted in science? Do we have to do that? And by the way, no, I haven't been to Burning Man, and no, if we talk about having an hour of sacred silence, I actually don't know what the flying F that means. Sorry, like, can someone help translator? Um,
You're
I
obviously
felt
not
very
following the
kind
right
of stepping.
accounts on Twitter. You know. Well,
And it's great stuff, and I learned a lot. But I just I felt like, well, if I'm going to give people access to this, that is physical, and that is um, also removing as many kind of cultural identity barriers as possible.
it must be translated. It must be translated to the American mainstream, the upper middle class, if nothing else. The people who live in the cul-de-sacs and drive the SUVs with the heated leather seats. They know they need something in their life, but it's not being beat with a bush by a Russian in a banya or whatever the heck it is, because they don't identify with that.
Yeah,
You
the way I see it, Tom, is the cold does not give a shit if you have an artisanal beard. The heat does not care if you wear balloon pants. It doesn't care.
That is a great point. Um, some other people might care. They might care in Japan if you have tattoos and now you're not allowed into their hot bath or something like that. And certainly, there's a tea ceremony, and these rituals are very meaningful to a certain tribe. If you're outside the tribe, and you're physiologically, your body is prepared to respond, but psychologically that doesn't work for you, then it makes sense that some other ritual or some other program that you identify with might make it more accessible.
Exactly. And I think I could see, for example, the Finnish culture having concerns that, oh, well, you've taken, a lot of what we adore and you stripped it out of the process. But you know what's really interesting? If you democratize this and you make it open to more people, you find people coming to me and going, oh, have you seen? I was going to get a sauna blanket with this traditional Finnish pattern. What do you think? They start to go find the culture, and the culture feels like something that belongs more to them than it would have if you had to start it at the other end of the process.
That makes sense to me. You were boasting a little bit that you have a 100% success rate with the people that you've been coaching through Drip Therm. Will you tell me what that means?
Um, yes, and I will qualify that 100% success rate. Um, the success is getting everybody, even those that put one foot over the tub, dip a toe in and go, nope, nope, just can't do it. Every single person has done it successfully. So that certainly is 100%. I'm probably about 98% on achieving what I want to achieve when I coach people through a cold plunge, Tom, which is it's not about getting in a cold bathtub, suffering for 3 minutes, waiting for it to be over, hearing a timer go off, and then get out and feel elated that it's over. To me, that's complete failure. It's about getting people to actually enjoy being in the, and I mean the word enjoy being in the cold, get really calm, and understand that, well, if I can meet this stress head on, deliberately, and get myself calm, then I can take that out into the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would call success. I would say we're probably 97, maybe 98% there. And I will tell you the only ones where the customer told me, "Oh, that was great, that was a success," and I was like, "No, it really wasn't." Is in those very rare instances where somebody has such control over their sense of identity that they couldn't possibly have somebody see them freak out
Gotcha.
or be uncomfortable or be vulnerable. That's the only time where maybe the customer told me it was a success, but I was kind of, that's not success by my bar.
Mm-hmm. Then take me to a movie. If I'm a newbie and I show up at Drip Therm and you're going to coach me through what happens, will you give us the screenplay of the Andrew Sheridan experience?
So I've never really talked about it before because I was always worried about the safety aspects. I think I understand enough now that I can give the one caveat about my process, because safety is obviously really important with the cold, and there's an additional contraindication for what I'm about to go through. But that movie basically goes, and we have a very specific process. So we go heat first, the customer for the first time. We explain the finished sauna. They do their session. They rinse off afterwards because obviously we sweat preferentially so much garbage in a hotter finished sauna. We want that gone, and we also don't want that or lotions, especially
Right.
in the cold plunge. Then they hit a bell that lets me know that I can go to the room, knock on the door, and we go through the cold plunge. The first thing I explain to them, Tom, is the stress curve is very different for cold versus, say, other hormetic stressors, such as exercise, physical stress, and heat stress.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, exercise and heat stress, that stress slowly builds and it peaks at the end of the session. It's, oh, wow, that was a tough workout. I'm done. Or that's enough heat. Thank you. I'm done. Cold, that stress curve is obviously very much front end loaded.
What
And
a great
I want people to understand.
realization. The cold hits you right away, and then it becomes more tolerable, at least to a point, rather than less, as opposed to the treadmill or the Stairmaster or something. When you get on, you're like, oh, this is okay. I should crank this up a little bit. And 5 minutes later, you're dying on that thing because you overdid it. The cold is the
Yep.
opposite stress curve over time. And that had never occurred to me. And I'm so glad you pointed it out. So you explain that. Does that increase their anxiety or does that put them at ease?
It can do uh, with certain individual. I'd say not everyone handles that information equally. The important next thing to explain to them is the great thing is if you reflexively gasp, you kind of your muscles tense. Remember two things. One, that happens to everybody. If it didn't suck, we wouldn't do it. So that's natural. We want that. That's okay. And the great thing about the process is after that first, let's call it 30 seconds, that's where the fun starts.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we use different tools to try to get people from, fight or flight, sympathetic state, learn to rebalance their autonomic nervous system themselves. It's not me. It's not soothing music. There's no soothing music. There's no sound bowls or anything. Again, we're stripping away everything other than the person learning to rebalance their stress themselves.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about those tools, but I'm going to interrupt this screenplay for a minute to review, because I'm a college professor, and if I don't review, my students don't learn anything. You pointed out that the typical hormetic stress curve builds over time. Exercise and heat are two familiar examples. When you first get into the sauna or you first get onto the rowing machine, you feel like, oh, I can do this. But as the stress accumulates over time, you become exhausted. And then you're like, all right, maybe I'm ready to quit. The cold has the opposite stress curve. It hits you really hard right away. Now, what I've noticed from people is that they have an anticipation based upon their hormetic stress experience that if it hits me this hard right now and it just gets worse over time, I'm going to die. It's all in their imagination. But because their experience has been stress gets worse over time instead of easier, the panic in the first 15 seconds of the cold plunge can be overwhelming. Not because they right now are going to die, not because right now they're in so much pain or distress that they couldn't take it for another second or another 2 seconds, but in their imagination, if they stay in for 15 seconds more, that's it. They couldn't handle it getting any worse. What you're preparing them for is to sort of guard against this false expectation. You're saying the first 15 seconds are going to be the worst. After 30 seconds, at least my experience is, I go, what was I even worried about? I'm fine. I'm calmed down. But to help them get there, you have some tools. What are the kinds of things that you're doing? If it's not sound bowls and it's not their favorite meditation and it's not some song on their phone, what are the tools that you're using that help them strengthen that parasympathetic response?
They're super simple, and I kind of put them in steps and categories. So I'll take you through the typical process we go through with a brand new cold plunger, someone that's brand new to cold, is after we've explained how the process is going to go and how that stress curve is going to start to decline, we explain that if you want to feel better as quickly as possible, the first thing you can do to get from sympathetic down into parasympathetic is breathe. And again, that my whole approach is about stripping out the extraneous or that's just too much for somebody to absorb and practically use at that point of time when they're already stressed. So the way I explain it to them is, this is not Wim Hof breathing. It's not advanced Wim Hof breathing. All you need to do is exhale. And if you can get a good, reliable 3 count on an exhale, it's amazing how quickly you can get down into a calm state. And I know there are multiple ways you can tell people how to breathe in. I tell people, suck in air whatever way you want. I don't care. Just concentrate on that 3 count. That's the first thing that starts to get people calm. And at this point, they're sitting up in the tub. I tell them to sit up. The next point is they go back up to their shoulders and the arms go in. And I explain to them in advance, hey, that's more cold water on your skin. That heart rate's going to rise again. Guess what? You've already learned how to deal with that. So this is your second chance to practice calming yourself down. So they go back, heart rate rises, breathe, bring it back down again. Next step is actually to get the vagus nerve in the water. So that's harder to explain to people. So I actually explain this part afterwards. I just tell them, look, get your chin where it's almost in the water. We want to have that vagus nerve activated. I'll explain why later. Trust me. So they do that. They get that in the water, breathe, calm down a bit, because again, that's a little more water on the skin. Then they typically start to get a lot calmer. The next step is, hey, why don't you take some of that ozone water and just dab it on your face? We don't need to dunk, just dab it on your face, breathe, see what happens. Then people realize, oh, yeah, I'm starting to get weight. Actually, this is really nice. That's when I explain to them the mammalian dive reflex and how the body needs to conserve precious oxygen if it thinks it's underwater, not that it's necessarily underwater. So the whole point of that phasing is it's very, very deliberate. The breathing part is really important to me because that is, again, going back to what people can practically use and take anywhere else. That is learning to get yourself calm when deliberately confronted with a stressor and you're doing it all yourself. You can take that out to the rest of the world. You can't take activating MDR out to the rest of the world. So that to me has to be a separate piece. And that's where the way I describe it is, if you want to see what really, really calm feels like how calm could you possibly be? That's the point of that component. But first it's, you learn to get that breathing down. We don't want to use other tools. We don't want the sound. We don't want the soothing bells or anything else that is going to make you feel like, oh, this wasn't all me. There were these environmental components that helped me get that calm. No, there's no environmental components. It's just the person.
There are two schools of thought. When you got to do something uncomfortable, there's I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off school of thought, get it done all at once. And then there's the gradual. What you've constructed is 4 stages of sympathetic, parasympathetic, pendulating between the two. And I didn't realize it until you just described it. When you first get in, there's the gasp reflex. This is an involuntary sympathetic division of the central nervous system response. We're only going up to, say, our nipples or our chest or something like that. And for especially the newbies, that's enough to initiate the gasp reflex. To help them get into the parasympathetic, which also is an involuntary, or I should say, automatic system. We call it rest and digest as opposed to fight or flight. And you don't have to tell your heart what to do. You don't have to tell your stomach what to do. You don't have to tell your intestines what to do. But in order to help them get into that parasympathetic state, you structure their breathing. This gives me a lot of confidence. I teach the same thing. I practice the same thing. The breath exists between the automatic and the voluntary. We know that if we're going to climb a set of stairs, we'll start to breathe more. We don't have to think about that, but we can hold our breath if we choose to. We could even hold our breath for the entire stair climb or the entire sprint if we want to, because the breath exists between the automatic and the voluntary aspects of our behavior. Now, I think that's great. In my mind, we're done. We've got them from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. But then you ask them to go a little deeper and put their arms in. And you know that when they do that, they are going to get sympathetic activation again. They're going to have to feel the same distress, the panic response of fight or flight, as they immerse more of their skin in the cold water. It might not last as long. It might not be as extreme, but it is exactly what they don't want in that moment, having already mastered sort of up to their armpits. Now they get the sympathetic activation, and you start the process again, if I'm understanding this correctly. Structure
Correct.
your breathing. It doesn't, the way I teach it, it doesn't have to be box breathing, but if that works for you, great. It doesn't have to be on any particular count, but if that works for you, great. A long, slow exhale is a really good way of structuring, of bringing your breath to the conscious level, making it voluntary, under your control, because you're choosing how to breathe. And then you do it again. You take them a little bit deeper. Now it's up to their chin. And this is a third sympathetic activation. Again, they structure their breath, gain control of their response, and hit a parasympathetic tone. And this is where some people are going to say, you must be some kind of a sadist because you have them splash water on their cheeks just to get that last little bit of sympathetic response. At that point, someone who's gone through the whole thing, and I don't care what the temperature is, if it's cold enough for them to gasp, they know they have a sympathetic response. At that point, they must have a lot of confidence that they'll be able to take that fight or flight activation and bring themselves back into a parasympathetic state because they've already done it 3 times. Is that what people are telling you?
That is absolutely, that's very well described. That is the net effect. And then that last thing that happens is when when they've breathed probably 3-5 times after their face is wet and their vagus nerve is activated, and that's where we have kind of a caution I'll come to afterwards. That's where people start to get so calm that I've created my own problem in that it's really hard to get people out at that
They
point.
don't want to
So
leave.
that's where the negotiations start. Before they get in, it's what? Wait, how long do we have to? Is it 2 minutes? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? What is it? At that point, we're at 4.5 minutes, and they're like, "Can I have an extra minute? Hey, can I have an extra 2 minutes? Can I have an extra 3 minutes?"
We
And we
can do
just,
this.
uh,
Yep.
yeah, there was one customer I actually had to flick water in her face. I'm like, no, we're 9 minutes. We're done. Our job here is to set a baseline and to learn. Right? We're done. I've created my own operational issues there, but in a way, I'm glad that I have.
Yeah.
And again, like this whole story started, this all kind of unfolded accidentally to some extent. We got where we've got. We know it works. The one caution I would give to that last aspect that I talked about, Tom, where we first get the vagus nerve activated and then we splash cold water on the face. And I will butcher the term, so hopefully you can help me out here. But the one very specific contraindication I've found to that is vasovagal syncope, which is, if I understand it correctly, there are certain people with this condition, if they get high into sympathetic state, that's okay. If they come down slightly into parasympathetic, so the breathing part, that's fine too, but they cannot get deeply, deeply calm because they can actually faint. And that's the one big, that's why I've never explained this process before, because that to me is the one big warning factor around that approach.
Have you seen that happen under your watch?
I've had 2 people with that condition that, thankfully, the first one, this goes back to the fun of waivers. Maybe it wasn't described on the waiver or described in the conversation that we have about contraindications before, but it came up in the water. And I very quickly realized I don't understand this completely, but yeah, this that's got to be a thing. Let's not test this. And then I went and researched and found that, oh, this can be a very real thing. Actually getting too calm too quickly after exciting the sympathetic nervous system can be problematic for that specific group of people.
I'm glad to know about it. It has never been reported to me, not by a reader or by a clinician. That is, I don't have any case studies of somebody fainting in the cold water, but neither do my readers pendulate between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic to the extent that you're doing it, at least not intentionally. And so I'm glad you're pointing it out. If somebody did faint, if you ever got that far, then you'd have to have someone who could rescue them, get them out of the tub, dry them off, rewarm them. I'm not sure what the worst possible adverse outcome could be, but it sounds like you need a rescue protocol for that.
Yeah, at least it's now a known, and that's
Mm-hmm.
great that it's now a known. But I think that, and it's not just that condition. I think it's in general. At any time, exercise is exactly the same. If you're inducing stress or a type of stress or a degree of stress that somebody isn't typically used to, there's always going to be a degree of risk. And that's actually where the coaching started from. It started from mostly a safety perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until we started to get feedback during soft launch that was, hey, this is really good. And some people saying, hey, can I do that a second time so that I really, really, I know that I've got it and I feel confident I can do this for the rest of my life. So we kind of got there, but we started with the safety component. One thing I've realized is that if people really want to do something and they know they have a contraindication, they won't necessarily declare it. They
Right.
will choose to take the risk for themselves. And that to me is a critical part of that first coach session at Drip.
Two clinicians have reported to me acute instances of high blood pressure. So this is a hypertensive crisis because they had subjects, or because they're clinicians, I could call them patients, who did not declare a chronic hypertension. When you get into the cold water, the vasoconstriction will reduce the volume of blood in your extremities, push it all into your core, and of course your head, because that's out of the water. This will increase your core blood pressure. And for someone with untreated chronic hypertension, it can put them into a dangerous situation. The remedy is to get them out and to rewarm them so that their circulatory system, or their circulation, is restored to their extremities and their blood pressure will come down. In those cases, they were clinically supervised and there were no long-lasting ill effects. But the clinicians were kind of pissed because they are aware of this contraindication and they would have planned for it differently if the patients had revealed it ahead of time. They felt a little bit, I don't mean to be speaking for them too much, but they felt a little bit betrayed because they're taking responsibility for the health of their patient and they didn't have all the information that they need. When you start with sauna, I think you're making a good choice. You're relaxing the blood vessels. The sauna, dry heat in the traditional Finnish sauna, has the opposite effect of wet cold. That's where the vasodilation is coming from. The heart rate will go up, the blood pressure come down. Blood glucose levels can go up in the sauna. The cold does the opposite. You might get an initial blood glucose spike and you might get an initial spike in the heart rate, but then blood glucose comes down, heart rate comes down, and blood pressure can go up. So the contrast that you've got is physiological. But what you're doing differently is intentionally introducing this neurological or psychological contrast by pendulating between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And I think it's brilliant. It's what I want to carry to more people and say this kind of contrast, thermal contrast, is wonderful. But this sort of neurological contrast, or maybe that's the wrong word, psychological contrast, is also available to you when you do it in this way.
Yep, that's so well put.
How should I credit you, Andrew? What should I call this?
The Sheridan method. I don't know. This was all accident talk. Again, everything we're talking about was an accident, and just trying to find a way to get as many people to enjoy this as possible, without having to come from a particular part of the population or be a certain age or be the biohacking jock. It doesn't matter. We just don't care, and that's kind of how we that's kind of how we got here. And I think that approach is very much settled now. I'm sure it will evolve slightly over time, but I know that it works. I know it's repeatable. I know that it works for men. I know that it works for women. I know that it works for 10-year-old kids. It just works.
When people have been through the method and they become acclimated to the cold, do they still use the same method?
They tell me they do. What they actually get used to is, used to is the wrong term. There's two things going on here. There's being acclimated to the cold, and there's almost what I would describe as an addiction to the calm.
Mm-hmm.
I hear phrases like, "Oh, I just didn't want to get out today. I didn't want to get out. Oh, hey, I did 12 minutes today." Like, 12 minutes? Why are you doing 12 minutes? I didn't want to stop. I just love that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what happened. So we have that physiological adaptation. We've got the psychological adaptation, but you also just get this. It becomes a pleasurable thing for people that they actually look forward to.
That makes sense, and I'm going to try it. Part of the reason that I go very cold and very short is because I get so dang bored. I'll be in there for 3-4 minutes. My mind will start to wander, and I'll begin to think of all the other things that I should be doing in my life. And I'm like, all right, that's 4, I'm out. But in order to get the same cold dose, in order to get the same psychological, that anxiety response, I need huge chunks of ice floating around in there. If I was going to do 4 minutes at 40 degrees, I wouldn't feel like I'm being challenged at all. But I'm going to try your method. I'm going to see if I get to that sort of bliss on the other side in the parasympathetic state, that comfort that you're saying your customers find addictive. And I'm going to, either way, I'm going to write about this nervous system pendulation as a new approach to cold plunge therapy that strips away some of the cultural, or what you call the ritual elements, and focuses on what's happening with your nervous system. And hopefully other people try it and report back how they experience it too.
Yeah, that would be great. And I know I had got down to, before I had to recalibrate the rooms here at Drip Tom, I was I would do 2.5 minutes at 32, and I would kind of call it. I would just count the time by my breaths, and then I'd
Yep.
call that enough. But what I realized is, not only can you get adapted to the cold, you can also get unadapted. So a
Yep.
good way to try that is just to stop for a while and go back, and you get to experience that all over again.
This is true, and it doesn't take very long if you're talking about extreme cold. I spent a week in Colombia, South America, in Cartagena, because the Army Corps of Engineers asked me to come down and speak at some workshop. There's no cold down there. I went swimming in the Gulf, and that was warm. The shower water was warm. When I got back to Phoenix and I was staring at my Morosco, I was like, oh, it's like the first ice bath all over again. It was miserable and wretched for the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew, thanks for spending this time with me this morning. I think this has been wonderful. We're going to put it out there where our audience can find it. And when we get feedback, I will not be surprised if more people want to hear from you about how you do this kind of coaching. But before I let you go, do you do anything to help your people rewarm?
I refuse. So this goes back to kind of the the core of what we're trying to achieve here is, I want the person to do it themselves. So I specifically say no warm or hot showers. Don't go back in that sauna. It's so tempting. You want to go back, don't do it. Just let yourself do the work. Let your
You
body
want
do the
their
work. And that's
metabolism to do the work.
exactly. And I even tell them drip dry. If you want to, it's an option. Just give your body a little more work to do to raise your core body temperature, even though you're out of the water. Think about it as work.
Here, we might differ. I towel dry. In the sun if I can. You can see how much sun is coming in through my windows today here in Phoenix. And then I'll do some light exercise, because I know that light exercise, to get the circulation going back into my limbs, is associated with a boost in testosterone and a boost in luteinizing hormone. And I love that aspect. If I were doing it to lose weight, if I were doing it to burn as many calories as possible, or if I were doing it to maximize the activity in the brown fat, I might take your approach. But mostly when I come out, I'm like, okay, I got 45 minutes. I got to get ready for class. And I want to be in sort of top mental shape when it's time for me to teach. Of course, I'm going to dry off. Of course, I'm going to do some push-ups or some lunges or some squats or my steel mace, get myself dressed, and then get off to campus. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody using some exercise after their ice bath. I think it is still their body doing the work. But do you disagree?
Oh no, I completely agree with that. In fact, that's something that you see to an extent in the Morozko method. It's something that you definitely see Wim Hof do.
Vim takes advantage of this for
Ex-
sure.
yeah, help again. It's to me, that's another version of the same process. You're still forcing your body to do the work. And when I did that in the Netherlands, it was a combination of, I think it was hail and snow at the time, after being in the ice bath for 10 minutes, 43 seconds up to the neck, where, we're getting snowed on and
Wonderful.
trying to warm ourselves up. But the one hard rule that he has, and it seems to be one of the few hard rules that I saw him have at any point in the entire weekend, is nobody's allowed to jump in that sauna. He's got a massive barrel sauna. It's
Don't
the
do
size
it.
of a small school bus. Don't do it. No, 30 minutes. You warm yourself up, and that certainly includes exercise. Can include exercise. It's a great option, but yeah, don't take the easy way out.
All right. Andrew, thanks so much for joining me. This has been enlightening, a
Thank you,
revelation,
Tom.
I might say.